The following is distributed by the Berean Call.
Good evening. Good evening. What are the issues? And I want to deal this evening with 4 issues: Iran, Iraq, the international terrorism, and where is Israel in all this? Let me first start with the issue of Iraq. Let me read you a few things that were said about Iraq in previous opportunities. Here is what President Clinton said about Iraq. And listen to it very carefully. It's not George Bush. It's Clinton who said about Iraq. If Saddam rejects peace and we have to use force, our purpose is clear. We want to seriously diminish the threat posed by Iraq weapons of mass destruction program. Did you hear it? We want seriously to diminish the threat posed by Iraq's weapons of mass destruction program. So there is a program of weapons of mass destruction. And his Secretary of State, Madeleine Albright, said, Iraq is a long way from the United States. But what happens there matters a great deal here. For the risk that the leaders of a rogue state will use nuclear, chemical, or biological weapons against us or our allies is the greatest security threat we face. And Sandy Berger, the national security advisor of Clinton, said about Saddam, he will use those weapons of mass destruction again as he has 10 times since 1983. And my very good friend, the Secretary of Defense, William Cohen, said that he is sure Saddam has stockpiles of weapons of mass destruction, that he remained absolutely convinced, even after our failure to find them in the wake of the invasion in March 2003. And then a few of the congressmen, John Kerry, senators and congressmen, John Kerry, urged the president, and I quote, to take necessary actions, including, if appropriate, air missile strikes on suspect Iraqi sites to respond effectively to the threat posed by Iraq's refusal to end its weapons of mass destruction program. And the leader of the House from California, Nancy Pelosi, Saddam Hussein has been engaged in the development of weapons of mass destruction technology, which is a threat to countries in the region, but he has made a mockery of weapons inspection process. And I can go on and on, but let me finish perhaps with what Senator Hillary Clinton said. In the 4 years since the inspectors left, intelligence reports show that Saddam Hussein has worked to rebuild his chemical and biological weapons stock, his missile delivery capability, and his nuclear program. He has also given aid, comfort, sanctuary to terrorists, including Al-Qaeda members. I can quote you on and on. All intelligence services, European intelligence services, Israeli intelligence services, The head of the CIA, appointed by President Clinton tenant, all of them agreed that there is a program of developing weapons of mass destruction. So it was not a crazy thing to go there. Whoever decided to go there had only one idea in his mind: to fulfill the duty of a leader of a country. And the main duty of a leader of a country is to protect its people. That's the main duty. All the rest are secondary. The first duty is to protect the safety of the people. How did God approve of the choice of David as a leader and of Saul before him? The Israeli says, well, we can't stand it anymore. There are these Philistines, they are already coming to the heart of our country. We need something to protect us. And there are only two things that can protect us, they said. One, and it's for us to remember, one is unity. Unity, unity. During World War II, the Republican Party fully cooperated with President Roosevelt. Fully cooperated. Not on one case did they try to jeopardize his activities, and there were reasons to jeopardize his agreement with the Soviet Union, etc. But unity, without unity you cannot defeat an enemy. And the second thing is a head of this union, whose first and foremost duty is not to build hospitals and not to build schools, but the first duty is to protect every single citizen in his country. And indeed, the seer, the prophet Samuel, decided to think, who can I appoint as a king for this union that will perform the most important duty to protect the people? And he said, I have an idea. Here's a man who just recently defeated the Ammonite, and he has done it with great talent. It's true that he has one disadvantage. He comes from the smallest tribe of Israel. But he has proven himself. I'll make him the king, Saul. And when Saul was killed, he chose David. David was not an angel. None of us are angels. David was also a sinner. He was a womanizer. But David provided the Israel with the most important thing. And they forgave him everything else with security. After David, you don't hear any more about the Philistines. Open the Bible. No more stories about the Philistines. He has extended the borders of Israel in such a way that he provided an extension of security to his people. And what he did for his people was good enough of a reason for Jesus, hundreds of years later, to pride himself, Revelation chapter 22, to pride himself and say, I am the root, I am a descendant of the house of David. Because David has performed the most important thing that a leader has to perform, to protect his people, to protect you, your children. That's what we demand from a leader. We demand it on any level. On any level. of leadership, whether it's in the White House or in the governorship or in the city. First and foremost, protect our people. Now we know that there are difficulties in Iran. By the way, difficulties which are diminished considerably from day to day. And here is what Iraq. And here is what an Iraqi columnist said. He says, what is happening in Iraq is destined not for the future, but for success. Now let's close our eyes for a minute and think what could happen if we make a decision to leave Iraq. Iraq will become a center of terrorist activities, destabilizing the whole Middle East. The whole countries in the Middle East will actually untie their relations with the United States. The terrorist activity, which will be harbored in Iraq, will affect nearby countries. In no time, Jordan will become a haven of terrorists. The king will be deposed. In no time, Lebanon, which struggles, will yield to the Hezbollah. In no time, the wave will reach Egypt and the Gulf states. This will be the result of us leaving Iraq. Anyone who stands now in Congress after years that they have demanded action on Iraq and admitted that Iraq has connections with Al-Qaeda, and indeed the Iraqi intelligence had their connections with Al-Qaeda, and demands now to leave Iraq, is definitely not doing a favor to the United States and to every member, every citizen of the United States. It's much more serious than we think. This is the issue of Iraq, and I want to add to it only one note. One of the things that have handicapped us in Iraq is the lack of intelligence. Recently, the Israeli has provided the American army with the know-how how to eliminate the head of the snake within less than 1 minute, most of the time within 40 seconds. You might have read in the newspaper that from time to time the Israeli send a missile to a head of the terrorist organization in Gaza Strip and eliminate him. By the time he leaves his home to enter his car, the missile already hits his car, and this takes usually between 20 to 40 seconds. Based on intelligence. And this cooperation of intelligence between the intelligence arm, the operation, and the Air Force takes less than 1 minute. In most of the cases, less than 40 seconds. And in the last operations in Iraq, United States has performed already similar feats. Now, why did we have from the beginning problems in Iraq? Lack of intelligence. Why the lack of intelligence? Because when Jimmy Carter became president, he gave an order to Admiral Turner, the head of the CIA, to eliminate all personal intelligence. We can work with what we have in the sky, they'll provide us with the information. Now, to develop another network of intelligence takes years, between 5 to 10 years. Well, Jimmy Carter did not only this. Jimmy Carter has actually also created the Iranian threat. When the mullahs and the other clergy, the Akintolas in Iran were about to take over, the army wanted to have a military coup and prevent him from doing it. Jimmy Carter, and I say all the time Jimmy Carter, not President Jimmy Carter, on purpose, because I think that he has to be impeached. Jimmy Carter has ordered the deputy commander of the American forces in Europe to go to Iran and convince the army not to do it, but to cooperate with the Ayatollahs. In less than a week, those who didn't escape from Iran were slaughtered. And since then, we have now the main problem in Iran, which I'll come back to it in a few minutes. And when we had in Iran the hostages, the most powerful country in the world could not release the hostages, when Iran did not have yet at that time an army, a serious army, a serious police. The most powerful country could not do it. Sure, the United States could have done it with another president. Carter was not stupid. He has a very high IQ. He doesn't use the high IQ in strategic matters. But he realized that he was a calamity in the history of the United States, with supporting a regime which is the worst that we have, and this is not the end. And when the Soviets entered Afghanistan, he decided to be active this time. He started to provide arms, money, the most advanced arms to fight the Soviets. Now, every Muslim in every Muslim country who was not satisfied in his own country came to Pakistan, to Afghanistan, from Egypt, from Lebanon, from North African countries, from Morocco, from every nook and corner in the world. And Jimmy Carter created the International Terrorist Organization. This was the wisdom of Jimmy Carter, probably because he did not pray to God to give him a little bit of wisdom. And we suffer from it until now, and will continue to suffer from it. And if this was not enough, without a request and without the slightest pressure of Panama, he decided to return an international waterway in Panama to the Panamanian government without stipulating anything about it. Now, those who are attached to it are the Chinese in our backyard of the United States. A lot of achievement for one president. So now we come to the second achievement, which is Iran. Iran, the president of Iran, as you all know, decided to develop nuclear arms. But he has a program, and it's a 4-stage program. Stage number 1, to take over not necessarily military-wise, to take over the countries around Iran. Some of the countries he definitely intends to take over. He already proclaimed that Bahrain, one of the Gulf states, belonged all the time to Iran. Exactly like Hitler. He said, the Sudets in the Czech Republic are part of Germany. Exactly like Hitler. Bahrain belongs to them. But even if he's not going to take over, the very fact that he'll have nuclear arms, he'll have full control on the Middle East. Full control of the Gulf state, of Saudi Arabia. They will not dare do anything to contradict Iran. And the first thing that they'll do is disconnect any relations with the United States. The United States was unable to protect us. Unable to protect us. We have somehow to find a way to accommodate Iran. Phase number 2, and maybe phase number 1, and this is 2, is to wipe off, as he declared it, Israel from the map. Phase number 3 is Europe. Europe is already populated, heavily populated by Muslims. He's going to see to it that Europe will be taken over. And phase number 4, he does not have any illusions that he can take over the United States. But he has the program of diminishing the influence of the United States and make the United States not as important as it is today. What will be later, he hasn't got it in his program, but these are 4 points in his program, which is not published, of course, with the exception of one thing, of wiping off Israel. So the question is, what can we do to prevent him from developing nuclear arms? The Israelis have tried a thing that they tried in the past in Egypt, when Egypt has invited German engineers to develop in Egypt a war industry. And Israel thought that a war industry in Egypt is too dangerous for Israel. And they have to make sure that the German engineers will leave Egypt. So, what they did with full success, it was the month of November, they sent packages of gifts to the wives of these engineers for Christmas. And when they opened the packages, they exploded, but the Israelis were reasonable enough to make sure that the explosion will not hurt them, but not only frighten them. And it worked. All the engineers left Germany. All of them without exception. So they tried a similar thing, not to send packages. There are many ways to skin a cat. But they have eliminated the head person, Iranian head person, which was in charge of the nuclear development, and some other people. This is not enough at this stage. This is not enough at this stage. And there are 3 theoretical possibilities. One possibility is, in spite of everything that goes on with the United Nations and the European Union, to still get sanctions which are very painful sanctions and apply them to Iran, with the hope that it will affect the process and they'll stop the development of the nuclear arms, that according to the information that I have, they'll have it in 2010. And the CIA has consented that their previous estimate was wrong, and the estimate that I provided them with is the correct one. This is one possibility. The other possibility is to invade Iran, and no one thinks about it. It's a very complicated issue. It will involve a lot of casualties, and it's off the table. The third possibility is to just bombard the sites. All the nuclear sites are dispersed over Iran. They are not concentrated in one place. And they are underground under very heavy concrete fortification. Now, without going into details, which I can't here, United States has a steel bomber which will not be detected by the Iranians, which can carry a very heavy load of bombs, deep penetrating bombs, very efficient ones. And I'm not going into, again, into specifics of it. And this is possibility number 3. Possibility number 4, and I'm speaking now theoretically, and then I'll examine what practically we can expect. Possibility number 4 is, of course, a change of government in Iran, but the forces to effect such a change do not exist in Iran. And the fifth possibility, I call it a biblical possibility, because something similar is mentioned in Judges chapter 3. Here was the head of the Israeli forces who paid a visit to the king of Ammon, and while he paid a visit to the king of Ammon, he killed him. From a practical point of view, I would say that that's the easiest thing to do. And I will not exclude it. Problem is that sometime a few years ago, Congress has decided that the CIA cannot eliminate a head of state. So whether it will be done or not be done, I don't know, but it is possible. Not only it is possible, let me say one word about possibilities. In my dictionary, in my book, the expression impossible does not exist. I don't believe that to attain a certain objective, there's an impossibility. From my experience in life, and I'm not the youngest person, I've never had a problem that I said to myself, it's impossible to do it. The same thing refers also to Israel. Israel is a result of non-stop mission impossible. Everything you have in Israel and everything that is Israelis, leaders in one way or another have done was mission impossible. Once I got an officer that was assigned to me, and he was in the rank of a lieutenant colonel. And I gave him the first mission. And he uttered a word that turned me on immediately. He said to me, "Commander, this is impossible." And I said to him, "Get out." The word impossible does not exist in my dictionary. And I'll give you quite a few illustrations about it. So, the thing about bombarding Iran, thing about killing the head of state are things that are possible. But there's another big disadvantage to the bombardment of Iran. A very serious disadvantage. Without the slightest doubt, after doing it, and assuming that it was effective, because the bombs are very accurate bombs, and the bombs signal exactly where they are, and they can be adjusted. After a successful bombardment of nuclear sites, we have to think what may happen. It's easy to make a decision, but every time one makes a decision, a very serious decision, one has to think also about the consequences. Two consequences will be immediately after this. A major terrorist happening will occur in the United States, without the slightest doubt. And number two, the evacuation of oil from the Persian Gulf will be very seriously handicapped. So if I have to be a commander who makes the decision, or a head of state who makes the decision, and they bring me all the three possibilities, I would have said the biblical solution is the valid one. But the issue is there. The issue of Iran is there. It's too serious. The consequences of developing nuclear arms, as I described it to you, is too serious to ignore it. And we have to make sure that whoever is going to rule, to preside over this country, and whoever is going to make the decisions in Congress, should know what you think about it. And there's one thing I'm sure that you are going to bring to them, because you have proven it by coming here, that you are not going to be couch potatoes and watch TV. You are going to be active. And you want to make sure that they hear your voice from any place you come. And they don't choose the easy way out of doing nothing. Because this will be a catastrophe. This will be a catastrophe which we cannot afford. We cannot afford, not only as a nation, we cannot afford as family people. We cannot afford the upsurge of the Al-Qaeda and terrorist activity, which will hit our country without the slightest doubt. Without the slightest doubt. And this we cannot afford. And I'm sure that you are the right people to have a wake up when you come back to your localities. I'm sure that you are not going to be idle there. Your coming here from all these places is a wonderful proof. Now, a few words about terrorism. Let me read you a short list. This is a partial record of killing by people of Islam, known better as the religion of peace. Muslim murdered 3,000 innocents in New York and expected no criticism. Muslim murdered 202 tourists in Bali and expect no criticism. Muslims murdered 333 school children and their teacher in Beslan, Russia, and they expect no criticism. Muslims murdered 292 innocent, mainly Kenyans and Tanzanians, at 2 United States embassies, and they expect no criticism. Muslims murdered 241 United States Marines and 58 French peacekeepers in Beirut, and they expect no criticism. Muslims murdered 52 in London and 191 in Madrid, and the religion of peace expect no criticism. Muslims murdered 200 in Mumbai, better known as Bombay, in India, and the religion of peace don't expect any criticism. This is a short list. Every day brings more information. All these were not murdered by Christians, not by Buddhists, not by Zen people, not by Baha'i people, not by Jews. Can't we say that they were murdered by Muslims? Can't CNN say that these are Muslims who murdered them? Because something happened in the world. There was a time when there were wars, and the wars, the civil population was not affected. Here there was the most crucial war between France and England in Waterloo. People were walking freely in Paris. People were walking freely in London. It did not affect the civil population. It affected the armies who were the French army and the British army who were in Waterloo. And this went on even during World War I. By and large, the civilian population were out of the fight, out of the battle. Children were not endangered. Then came World War II, and the Nazis introduced a new element. You hit the civilian population. You can still see pictures how they bombard people who flee Paris in carts, in wagons, in chariots, on bicycles. They flee from Paris and they bombard them. They are not part of the army. They are not armed. They are not fighting the Germans. They are fleeing. They are escaping, and they bombard them. There was a time that this was out, even among extreme revolutionaries. In Russia before communism, there was a party called the Social Revolutionaries. In short, SR, Social Revolutionaries. And they decided to kill the Tsar, the King of Russia, Alexander III. To put an ambush, to find out what is his route every day with the chariot. And the man who was supposed to do it, was expected to do it, was the brother of the future leader of the communist Russia, Vladimir Ilyich Ulyanov, better known by the name Lenin. His brother was the person who was supposed to do it. And here comes the chariot, the Tsar's chariot. And it comes to the point where he can already lift the rifle, aim the rifle, and shoot. And suddenly he sees a child with a Tsar, and he did not shoot. This does not exist now. The PLO has zeroed in, focused in Israel on schools, on kindergartens, of homes for babies. Al-Qaeda does the same thing. It's the non-armed population that they focus on. The Twin Towers. And tomorrow it will be a mall. Recently they already arrested a Somali guy who was supposed to explode the mall in Ohio. Somali guy? Somali guy? And where was our intelligence here? Where were these who are responsible for our borders? Where were these who are responsible to check people who arrive at the airport? A person comes from Somalia, a Muslim, and they don't apprehend him? If this goes on, we are wide open. We are wide open. And that's part of your duty. One of you people asked me, what shall we do after the meeting? Part of your duty. Duty to see your local representatives, your congressman, and say to him, hey, this case of the Somali guy, we want it to be interrogated. We want to find out how it could happen. And draw the conclusions. And we want to hear what you are doing to make it tougher for people like this to enter the United States. There's a way to finish with terrorism. And there's no other way to do it. And the way is to hit the head of the snake and to dry the swamp. There's no other way but to hit the head of the snake. It's the snake who kicked us out from paradise. And if we want to get back to paradise, we have to eliminate all the snakes. And it can be done because there's nothing impossible. And the other thing is to dry up the swamps. The supply of money under different covers. Oh yes, it's true that we are giving money to the Hamas, but we are not giving them to get arms. We are giving them for the social activities, for the health activities, etc. And we have organizations like this who have a status of tax-free organizations, charitable organizations, which obviously affect your taxing, and they channel money. Every organization who says, oh no, we are channeling only positive activities, should be closed. We are in war. It's World War IV. World War III was the Cold War. It was ended with President Reagan. We are in World War and we cannot afford this. We cannot even afford judges that will deal with these people. We have to establish a special courts that will deal with these people. Not that they'll use the democratic institution of the United States to prosper and to make sure that the organization which they support prosper and hit us back. It's war. And in war, we have done a terrible thing in World War II when we have sent the Japanese, but we have done it because we realized it's war. Maybe we should have dealt with it in a different way. But definitely we should deal in a different way with all the issues that we have today. Because the issue is not just peace in the world. The issue is security and safety of every one of us and the members of his family. And we cannot afford to be apathetic about it. We cannot afford to be indifferent to it. At stake is the security and the safety of our families. And a few words about Israel in all this. There's a paper which was prepared about what Israel has contributed to the United States. We are hearing only what the United States gives Israel. And the paper proves that whatever Israel has provided the United States with exceeds by far what the United States has given to Israel. And I will give just a few examples. The year is 1970. There's a revolt of PLO people in Jordan. At the same time, Syrian tanks already enter Jordan. At that time, Syria and Egypt are under the influence of Russia. Jordan is on the verge, trembling, and on the verge of collapse. And when Jordan will collapse by Syrian tanks, Jordan will become part of the group of countries that are under Russian influence. And it will take no time until the Russians will have their hands on the taps of oil. And President Nixon picks up a phone and calls the Prime Minister of Israel and says to him, "This is the situation. You have to do something because you are the only ones who can make a difference." And Israel amasses tanks on the border of Jordan, Israel, and Syria, and have some Air Force sorties, and the Syrians get the message and retreat. Jordan is saved. The Russians don't have their hands on the taps of oil. The whole Middle East could have been changed. Contribution number one, maybe the most extreme one, maybe the most important one, maybe the most significant one. On the level of arms, every new arm that the Israelis have acquired in the course of war from Russia, not directly but indirectly through Syria and Egypt, they have provided the information and provided the tanks, the artillery, the planes to the United States to save the United States years of research and training to face these arms. By the way, the Israelis once asked Russia, why do they send their arms to Israel via Egypt and not directly? And the last case was a case that the United States was not sure that they'll succeed with it, that the Israeli will succeed with it. Say to the Israeli, we wonder whether you can provide us with the last MiG. MiG is the Russian warplane. And the Israelis said, oh yes, the MiG is now in Arab countries, this MiG. The Iraqis have this MiG. So they went to the shelf in the intelligence of the army, pulled out a file with the names of all the Iraqi pilots, and with remarks at each name about the pilot, and checked who is the best candidate to negotiate with him to bring a MiG from Iraq. And they zeroed in on a certain person, which proved the right person, And here we are for a moment in a restaurant in Italy. The group of the Mossad people are sitting with this pilot who came to Italy. At the other corner of the restaurant sits someone who is responsible of the group, and he listens to what goes on in the discussion, and when he nods his head, they know that they should conclude. And they conclude with him that he will come with the MiG to Israel and land in Israel. Very simple. They have the list of pilots, all the pilots of Iraq. They have remarks, and they have made arrangement with him to come. They warned the Air Force that an Iraqi plane will come to Israel, and in spite of the warning, the Air Force almost downed this plane. The last minute it was avoided. He landed, the plane was given to the American Air Force. Easy, simple. How difficult is? Based on intelligence, because intelligence is the key word in everything. In every single thing, intelligence is the key word. And intelligence is the key word also to apprehend people here in the United States. And the good news is that the FBI have exceeded in apprehending suspected people more than they have done in tens of years. They have done in 1 and 2 years. Because they have planted people in the suspected organizations. So if we didn't hear from 9/11 5-6 years ago, all due respect to the FBI. And this they learned from Israel. What is the situation in Israel itself? Let me first of all be very open with you and tell you, which I've told Dave and Professor Price, I am absolutely for the equation of land for peace. I agree. I definitely agree to provide peace for the Arabs for land that they will give Israel. What are the chances of having an agreement, a peace agreement with Syria? In my book, it should be prohibited. Because there is no doubt that if Syria will agree to a peace agreement with Israel, it's only for the returning of the Golan Heights. And they will try to tell the Israelis, hey, we promise you another thing. Between your new border, which is more or less the Jordan River, and way, way into Syria, no Syrian tanks will be permitted. No Syrian military will be permitted. But in no time, and I didn't see the program of the Syrian, but I can assure you that that's it, in no time they'll have a string of towns, of civilian, quote, unquote, civilian towns along the new border with Israel, which means on the Jordan River. And every civilian town will be composed of military people. This will be the plan. The commander is expected to look forward and to analyze what may happen, and according to this make the decision. And I, for one, have no doubt that this is what will happen. Which means that when the Syrian will feel that the time has come to launch under any pretext a new war against Israel, they'll start it from the Jordan River and enter the state of Israel. One has to be in the mind of a crazy person or of a Jimmy Carter person to agree to such an agreement. So, peace with Syria, I'm pretty sure, is out. After what happened in Lebanon, what can we say about the Israelis? So first of all, I want to give the column of the pluses of Lebanon. We all know what happened in Lebanon, the criticism, but the pluses. Pluses number one, of slightly more than 2,000 Hezbollah people, 1,500 were affected. Out of the 1,500, about 600 were killed, and this is a significant number of their people, probably about 25% of the people killed, and another 1,000 were wounded seriously. This is number one. Number two, something happened in southern Lebanon, which they did not dream of. They are in a way out of southern Lebanon. The European army people in southern Lebanon have more teeth than they used to have in the past. This is not to say that the Hezbollah is not coming clandestinely and establishing again fortification and acquiring arms which they deposit in southern Lebanon. But they are not the masters of southern Lebanon now. Moreover, all their headquarters was completely demolished. Their activities now are conducted from a shelter, underground shelter. The commander, the secretary general, the leader of the Hezbollah, and the whole leadership don't dare to show their face during the day. About 50% of the people in Lebanon reject the Hezbollah. Previously, they were the defenders of Lebanon. Now they reject the Hezbollah. All their medium and large missiles, all of them were completely eliminated. And the damage to Israeli tanks, which they intended to cause a very serious damage, was negligible compared with what they planned to do, because during the Sinai campaign, the Yom Kippur War, there were about 500 tanks who were seriously damaged by new anti-tank fire, which the Israelis were not aware of. In Lebanon, only 25 Israeli tanks were damaged. The Israelis have learned their lesson, and the lesson is a very simple one. We teach every commander in the Israeli army, when they embark on a mission, the first paragraph on the order, the mission order, which goes to their subordinates, the first paragraph is called the objective. The objective is to catch hill number 69. The objective is to attack the stronghold number X of this particular unit, number X, and eliminate it, and so on and so forth. There were no objectives, actually objectives, in the battle order of the Israelis in the last Lebanon war. In nowadays, we cannot afford a leader We cannot afford a leader of a country who is not familiar with military matters. We just cannot afford it. And I'm sure that the Israelis will draw the conclusions. They have now a very good Secretary of Defense, a man who was the most decorated officer in the Israeli army, a man who was the head of the Israeli commando unit, the elite commando unit, was the chief of staff of the Israeli army, an extremely professional and clever strategic person. So I believe that Israel has acquired the lessons and will implement them, even if it may be not sooner but later, but it will be implemented. And they will come again to the basis of what I said, operations, there is no thing which is impossible. Let me give you perhaps that you understand what the word impossible is. Let me give you a few examples. And I'll start with an example before the State of Israel was established. I was involved in clandestine operation of bringing Holocaust survivors to Palestine. What we usually did, of course, we got them from Central Europe where they were. They were in Germany and Austria, to bring them to a port, and from the port a boat was waiting for them and took them to Palestine. Usually we prevented bringing them to the port, but at the last minute, because we knew that there are British spies that will immediately detect it, and then they look for the boat, and it will make things much easier for the British. I was in Austria. I got a message from the person that I worked as his right-hand man, and he said to me, send the people. Usually it was a very easy thing. We went with them to the Alps, climbed the mountains, crossed the mountains to the other side of the border. The other side of the border, there was already a convoy of trucks waiting for them, and we took them to the port. But this time, it was an early winter in Austria. The people that I had, there were many women, some pregnant women, children, elderly person. I felt that it's impossible that the people will cross the mountains in such a weather. So when I got the message, we didn't have at that time cell phones. When I got the message, send the people, I wrote on the same message with a runner, I said, tell me how. And then within 24 hours, the same runner came back, and on the same piece of paper was written, that's your problem. Well, I knew that I have to find a solution. What kind of solution can I find? What can I do? But believing that there is nothing impossible, I start looking for a solution. And at midnight, I called the people who worked with me. I said to them, make sure that we are living in the morning, during daylight, in the trucks, and the tarpaulin will be folded so everyone can see that there are people in the trucks, and not some merchandise, but people. And we are going to cross the border in daylight with the trucks. And they looked at me, and they said to me, Shimon, are you sure? I said, yes. Are you sure we'll succeed? I said, probably yes. And I had a paper, an official paper in my possession. the official paper said 3 words: not a pass. You can go with the people, but you cannot pass. Not a pass. And I came with the paper to the Italian border, where there was an Italian sentry there. And I took out the paper and I read to him from the not a, I read to him one word: nota pass. Nota in Italian means certificate, a certificate to pass. He opened the gate and we passed. My sisters and brothers, there is nothing impossible. There is nothing impossible. Example number 2. It was November 47. The United Nations just declared the approval of the establishment of a state, of a Jewish state and an Arab state. We knew that the Arabs will not accept it and will start a war. And I was called to the office of the founder of Israel and the first Prime Minister of Israel, David Ben-Gurion. And he told me, you are aware of the fact that there is a controversy going on in the leadership of Israel. Most of the leaders of Israel are against declaring a state. I'm for it, he says to me. I was 25 years old, I don't know why he told me this. I'm for it, but I'm in the minority. And I admit that the logic is with those who are against it. Because at the meeting that was just prior to the time that I entered his office, he said, we have no tanks. The enemies have 600 tanks. We have no fighting planes. The enemies have hundreds of fighting planes. We have just 60,000 people, and even the 60,000 people, not everyone has a rifle. The other ones are well equipped. We have people that a large part of them were not even trained. The other part were trained for years. And he said to me, what do you think? I said to him, Ben-Gurion, we all called him Ben-Gurion, not Mr., no nothing. I said, Ben-Gurion, I think that we should declare a state. He said, what about the balance of power? I said to him, we have one thing that the other side don't have. And this is the decisive thing which will help us. We have a commander-in-chief. They don't have it. During all the wars of Israel, we had a commander-in-chief. And we still have a commander-in-chief. By the grace of God, will prevail. Thank you. Thanks.
Please visit our website, thebereancall.org, to access our radio archives going back to 1999 and our newsletter going back to 1986. We offer daily updates by email or visit us on Facebook or Twitter. Are you looking for information about a specific topic? Go to thebereancall.org and click on Topics at the top of the page. Our online store is thebereancall.com. We offer a wide variety of books, tracts, CDs, and DVDs. Note that most of our ebooks are free. I'm Gary Carmichael. Thanks for tuning in, and we hope you can join us again next week. Until then, we encourage you to search the Scriptures 24/7.
Though none go with me, I still will follow. No turning back, no turning back.